When Sara and Nate Hagerty were married in 2001, they looked forward to starting a family. A few years later, Sara found out she couldn't have children. In 2009, the couple decided to adopt. First, 2 children from Ethiopia. Then, 2 years later, 2 from Uganda. In her book, Every Bitter Thing is Sweet, Sara shares about how her personal setbacks transformed her life into a hope-filled journey. Well, Sara, you've had your fair share of pain in life with the loss of your daddy and infertility and financial crisis. And out of that pain, you chose to write this book, Every Bitter Thing is Sweet. So why this title?
Proverbs 27:7 says, to the satiated soul loathes the honeycomb, but to the hungry soul, every bitter thing is sweet. And I read that for the first time, I think it was for the first time at my kitchen table when we were kind of in the throes of some of these struggles. And I went, I'm on the inside feeling bitter and hardened towards God. And I read that verse and went, this is an opportunity. I can be hungry and I can find his sweetness here. And it shifted my perspective on my pain.
And you know, part of that pain was going through years of infertility. And you know, a lot of women or men may be bitter towards God because of that, but yet you chose to listen to him and adopt not just 1, but 4 children from Africa. How were you able to do that and get through that in the adoption?
Well, I think the key for me was seeing my pain as an invitation. That it wasn't just that God was shutting down my life and saying, I've turned my back on you, but instead he was saying, there's more of me for you here. And he was introducing to me the concept of just conversation with him out of pain, of really quite literally crying before him and saying, God, would you take this pain and speak into it? And in that conversation then, having my heart be open to a plan that he had for me that I wouldn't necessarily have planned myself.
So how was the adoption process for you?
Both adoptions, we adopted 2 separate times, 2 children from Ethiopia and 2 from Uganda. Both were intense for different reasons. The first one was especially intense because the delays. We thought we would bring them home in 8 months, and it ended up being 2 years before we brought them home. But again, the Lord continued to use that delay to say, I want to meet with you here. This can be your golden hour while you're waiting and your children are on the other side of the world and your flesh wants to cry out and say, why are you doing this to me, God? God offered it as an invitation. This is your chance to talk to me and to find me.
Yeah. You know, as a mom, I'm a mom myself, and there's a part in your book where the water filter tank had just fell and damaged all your keepsakes. And you wrote, I'd known the pain of loss, the pain of not yet, but I hadn't predicted the pain of motherhood's mundane demands.
Yes.
How real did it get for you?
Oh, my word. I mean, mundanity. I didn't know that living the day-to-day in the quiet, hidden with my children could potentially be as painful as some of the other things that I had walked through. And facing just I walk out of my door at 7 a.m. and I have a barrage of, Mommy, I need this, and I need this, and sibling squabbles, or like in that instance where the water filter broke and I've got to fix something in the house. The Lord really began to show me that what I had learned in an earlier season of finding him just in my own personal pain was equally applicable in mundanity. And that he wanted to meet with me, and that my mundane, when no one else saw it, it was glorious to him. And that conversation that I had with him when I was crying out and hurt and in pain could be the same conversation that I could have at 8 a.m. when I've got breakfast dishes and 4 or 5 sets of needs in front of me, and 8 hours before I might see another adult. And it still is the same. He loves us in the hiddenness.
He was there.
He was there.
So after 10 years of waiting, over 10 years of waiting, God opened your womb and gave you a son of your own, Boaz.
Yes.
So what was it like waiting on God before it happened, and then afterwards? How did you feel after the fulfillment?
Well, I'll tell you a story. The morning that we discovered that I was pregnant, which was both a shock and, well, it was mostly a shock. When I shared the news with my husband, he said to me right away, and this was not any sort of theological declaration, this was just sort of a guttural response. He said, has the favor of God lifted from our lives? Because we had experienced so much internal fruit in our hearts and so much intimacy with him while we waited on this prayer that all of a sudden when God answered, we thought, wait a second, that whole season looks totally different. In retrospect, we look back and we go, you were good and you were faithful. And so having Bo, our baby, has been a beautiful blessing, but it also has given us real perspective that there is awesome fruit to be had in pain and in waiting.
Speak to someone who's listening. Maybe they're waiting on a promise, whether 10, 20 years, and it hasn't happened. What would you say to encourage them?
I would say this is your golden hour. This is the moment where you can meet with God, and it can all change. Not when your external circumstances feel like they are thwarted or delayed, you can come alive on the inside in God, and it really can change everything. You can still be walking through the same thing externally in the same waiting room of your life, and yet have God come and meet you in such a way that you go, whoa, this looks different, and I'm alive here.